thoughts, okay?
All right.
So what is your current thoughts and ideas on climate change?
It's something that we have to think of because President Donald Trump did not believe in climate change, and now what I saw was that in 2000 and 2100, many cities are going to be underwater.
Well, I definitely think it's happening. I mean, we can see it with our weather has changed significantly. I have been in the Bay Area my entire life, and it's definitely not the same climate it was when I was growing up.
I think climate change is it's getting to that point where it's almost too bad to repair, but there's still time. So it's definitely one of those we have to start working on this ASAP in a more serious capacity. But I do think most of the blame falls on corporations and factories and big things.
Right now it's getting a little bit crazy because you know how the weathers, they say, oh, it's a sunny day, next thing you know it's a warm day. So I'm saying they're not calculating things right a little bit.
Have you heard of the term Anthropocene before?
Nah.
I have not.
I don't think so.
No, I have not.
Okay, so just to give you some context, Anthropocene is kind of the same way how we think of Jurassic. So it's a certain time and period. Specifically, Anthropocene is more related to how we think humans have a lot more effect on the world and just our climate overall. And then saying that, do you believe islands or any other geography or lands are indicators of climate change?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe islands are probably kind of the first ones to feel the effects of climate change? Or
Yes.
The Anthropocene? Okay.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I mean, they're right at sea level, so they're going to be most affected with, the rising water. And then as the different weather patterns change, they're definitely impacted and hit first.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, do you believe they would kind of be the first ones to feel that effect of anything before maybe the United States or even just in general?
Almost certainly with most types of, especially with sea level rises, I think islands would be kind of the first to recognize that effect on their own lives.
Yes and no.
Fresh for us, because if they were to be able to burn down, we wouldn't have the fresh air.
So do you believe that they would be kind of the first ones to feel the effects of climate change and the Anthropocene we were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so we're going to show you a video kind of related to the Marshallese Islands. This one's going to be more based around the 40s and 50s. This is just going to show you a couple images of what happened to the Marshallese people.
States detonated 67 nuclear bombs in the Marshall Islands' northern atolls of Bikini and Eniwetok. At first glance, the Marshall Islands appear peaceful, ecologically healthy, and isolated paradise, where skies are blue, where corals had been able to thrive, where turtles, sharks, fish are all in abundance. But more than any other place, the Marshall Islands is a victim of the two greatest threats facing humanity: nuclear weapons and climate change. The convergence is most symbolically epitomized at the Tomb, an unlined bomb crater on the island of Runit in Eniwetok Atoll. This is where the United States buried plutonium and other remnants of nuclear testing under an 18-inch thick concrete cap 39 years ago. As sea levels creep higher in the Central Pacific, the Tomb has begun bobbing up and down with the tides. The United States has no plan to prevent it from crumbling and spreading radiation even further across the nation's northern atolls. The crater site, arguably one of the most destructive physical scars of the Cold War, is deceptively peaceful. Nam Island, which is adjacent to the site and was blown in half during the Bravo operation, is home to fairy terns and giant coconut crabs and is a nesting site for sea turtles. Hundreds of just hatched sea turtles were seen spilling across the beach into the lagoon. Abandoned and crumbling concrete bunkers and twisted rebar snake through the coral beds. And at the bottom of Bikini's lagoon, where the U.S. detonated the largest hydrothermal bomb it ever detonated, the Castle Bravo bomb, that's where a group of researchers from Columbia University have been studying the radiation left behind by Castle Bravo and the other bombs. A team of professional divers took core samples from the bottom of Castle Bravo, at some point over 180 feet deep.
So what are you reading?
3.6.
The research team went around different islands in the northern atolls to test the background radiation using Geiger counters. In June, the researchers revealed that part of Rongelap Atoll, one of 27 atolls in the Marshall Islands, is as irradiated as some of the most notorious nuclear waste sites on the planet, including Chernobyl and Fukushima. The other major threat is climate change, and few places are more vulnerable to its impacts than the Marshall Islands and other low-lying Pacific islands. The seas in the Central Pacific are rising, twice as fast as anywhere else on the planet. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts sea levels could rise 4 to 5 feet by the end of the century, making the Marshall Islands, where the highest point is 6 feet above sea level, physically unlivable. In addition to rising sea levels, global warming has caused a rapid decline in healthy corals, including bleaching. When we visited the atolls last year, we saw dead and bleached coral across wide swaths of Bikini, Eniwetok, and Rongelap lagoons. The day after the hottest day on record for 2018, thousands of dead fish formed a black line along the high tide line of Bikini Island's beaches. The die-off of fish, clams, and other marine life is eliminating a traditional source of protein for the islanders, making them more dependent on imported and less healthy food. As the United States and the Marshall Islands begin negotiations for a new Compact of Free Association, the Marshallese are hoping this new information from the Columbia University researchers will put them in a better place to begin negotiations as they move forward.
Was a report by the LA Times on the Marshallese Islands and what happened after Project 4.1. So Project 4.1 was just a nuclear testing site that they used with human subjects as well, being the Marshallese people. And after seeing that, do you think it was morally right to test the Marshallese and use them as human subjects, even though they were moved like just around 170 miles away?
No.
No, because you never know what effects a human could have or what is their problem inside their bodies.
Okay. And then, so what you saw there were the effects from the 50s and 60s, being the Cold War. They were given reparations of $750 million. Do you believe that was a fair amount after being moved around and seeing that their health risk was still increasing?
No, it should have been more.
Okay.
It depends on the other people's perspective of how they see it. For me personally, if I were to help them, yes, but it depends on the amount they want.
Lastly, after watching these videos, do you believe that we have a responsibility to help the people of the Marshall Islands or any other islands in general around? As you saw, it's not just the Marshallese Islands, it's the other islands and atolls around that are also being damaged.
I think we can, because we want to know what's wrong with the ocean and the island.
Watching these videos, do you believe we have a responsibility to help the people of the Marshall Islands still and other islands around them?
Yes, because some of them, they don't, how they're islands, they don't have nowhere to go. And we, like America or other countries could actually go over there and bring them over here.
Okay. And then lastly, seeing after those videos, would you consider nuclear fallout as part of the effects of climate change and just human cause?
I believe with yes.
Yes.
In 1946, the Navy pulled into the harbor, the lagoon in Bikini, and went ashore and told the people there that the United States would like to use their atoll as testing a site for bombs, atomic bombs. This very direct approach was well rehearsed. The team that went there to quote seek the permission of the natives couched it in terms of something that was the will of God, that it was a call from God for the people of Bikini to sacrifice for the peace and security of the world. So the people left. Eniwetok atoll was also evacuated for the tests. while 67 devices were reportedly detonated in that period. The extent of the nuclear insult, for lack of a better word, the yield of those tests has been estimated at 1.7 Hiroshima shots every day for 12 years. We in the Marshalls, covering an area just under 1 million square miles of ocean, were the direct, the ground zero, extended ground zero of the atomic bomb tests.
The largest explosion, and still the most powerful nuclear device ever detonated by the U.S., took place March 1st, 1954. Codenamed Bravo, it was a 15-megaton hydrogen bomb equivalent to 1,000 Hiroshimas. A miscalculation caused the yield to be about double what was expected. The radioactive fallout blew right onto 2 inhabited atolls downwind. More than 200 people were on those atolls, men, women, and children.
Rongelap is one of the 4 affected atolls by the nuclear testing of the United States from 1946 to the late 50s. The Rongelapese people, not only the land that has been contaminated from radiation, but their bodies and their health is also as affected from the fallout of March 1st, 1954.
National Cancer Institute was asked to determine what kind of cancer burden was generated from the nuclear testing. And in 2004, they came out with a report that said, in the period of time between 1946 and 1958, the people who lived in the Marshall Islands during that time, it would have generated an excess of 530 excess cancers, at least, above the background. And half of those, over 200, because of they take a while to grow, have yet to produce themselves. So it's quite a heavy load.
As bad as the health effects of the testing were, the upheaval caused by the displacement of people from one island to another was even more damaging.
If you take a community away from its land and its lagoon, and you place them in another atoll, the fabric, the social fabric of that community is ripped apart.
The land is where it gives you the freedom to express yourself as you are, as a Marshallese person with your traditional culture.
When you move people off their islands where they live to do the testing, you break down their entire community structure. What is the impact on health? You know, the stress issues. You contaminate their lands. They can't grow things that they used to eat. When you urbanize, infectious diseases tend to take off. They get more diabetic because, you know, they're eating a Western diet. All those kinds of things, to me, have actually the larger impact than the ionizing radiation.
You saw the videos. This was more from the point of view of the Marshallese.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was morally right to test the Marshall Islands and use human subjects?
Not really. I don't think it's morally right.
No, of course not.
I think it wasn't okay because that's how the population of humans decrease, and I don't think us humans are like test objects.
I think at that time, though, everybody was just doing really terrible stuff and nobody cared about each other. So, like, I'm not surprised, basically, because it's not that far from, like, the McCarthy era, and, like, Japanese internment had just come to an end. So it's, like, literally all bad. No one cares about anything. But I think that the reason that they went for the islands was because they wanted to, like, have as little impact as possible.
As I was watching that, I couldn't help but think about, parallels of, when Columbus came over and, took the land from the Indians, and when our own government was, moving the indigenous people out with the Trail of Tears, and as I mentioned, Hiroshima with Japan. So of course not, but sad thing is, it's kind of not surprising because there's a history of it.
Yeah, definitely. And then what you kind of saw was also more of the effects in that time, but there's also something called the dome, which is basically where all that nuclear fallout, not only from those tests, but also the tests in Arizona and other places, were dumped onto one island. And they were sealed by the Americans. Unfortunately, though, we don't maintain it. It's kind of just, it's a dump. We left it, we went. But reparations were sent in 2008 in a form of $750 million. And then what we just wanted to ask is, do you believe that was a fair amount after what you just saw and after the tests and obviously the rise in health risk and everything like that as well?
I mean, I don't think you can put a price tag on that. I think it's great that we did send that in the first place. That's a good step. Is it a fair amount? No. Obviously, we could do more, but
I mean, I think reparations and any kind of monetary compensation is always going to be imperfect, because it is it's a common thing, right? They're just oh, here's money, it fixes everything, which isn't reality. But I guess it's what else can be done to repair something that happened in the past? There's obviously things that they can do in the present, but to repair something that happened historically, I think money is kind of the only option a lot of these leaders think works. As for quantity and just in general, the fact that they've been paid reparations, I guess it's better than nothing. I don't necessarily.
I think it was a good decision that the Marshallese did that, because I believe they were getting used for things that they were innocent, that they didn't want to get used for, and that's their give back to back,
After watching the videos, do you believe we have a responsibility to help the people of the Marshall Islands and the other people on other islands as well?
I do, if we're the ones doing these tests, if it's our responsibility because of things that we've done, I do. But I don't, if it's, places where we haven't partaken in tests and whatnot, I don't think it's our responsibility. We don't need to be the world police.
No?
I think so, yeah. I think in any circumstance where there has been long-lasting effects, not just nuclear fallout, there's obviously other examples. You mentioned Arizona. Chernobyl is still really gross. And what happened in Japan just a few years ago after the tsunami hit. But there's also similar types of events, 9/11. A lot of the first responders dealt with a lot of cancers and a lot of other ailments because of gas and the dust inhalation. And I feel all of these kinds of groups where it was either an accident, a tragedy that happened, for example, in Chernobyl or in Japan with the tsunami. I understand people wanting a little bit less overreach, but it is still a humanitarian effort. But when you're talking about people who are directly impacted, victimized by another group, then 100%, until all ailments have been recovered and that particular group agrees okay, we're past it now, only at that point I feel can you start to think about maybe stopping support. But until that point, yeah,
definitely. So
I believe we should help them out more, because I was saying, I don't think humans would be good for testing things. We're not testing objects.
do you believe that the nuclear fallout is also can be kind of termed under climate change as well? Because as you saw, it meant the moving of people from their environment, from their homes, and community structures also being moved around.
I've never really thought about it like that, but now that you say that, and kind of thinking that climate change is definitely influenced by humans, so yeah, probably.
I don't know if I would put it under the umbrella, because I feel like nuclear fallout does tend to be mostly located to like one central area, whereas like climate change, in my head, I often just think about like the entire planet as like a big scale. It does impact a local climate. It does impact in the same way, like it can affect the weather or what grows there or how the people live, like their life expectancy. So from that perspective, it's very similar. Maybe a slightly different term, local climate change or something, but not like a global. I don't know that I would call it like a global thing, but it's like adjacent. It's so similar that it's not.
And then last question, do you have any like last messages or anything you want to say to the Marshallese people?
I think it's just really tragic, really sad that in the modern era, like we haven't gotten past war. Obviously, like what's happening right now is an indicator that we're, as like a human race, not past that. It's always really tragic when it affects regular people's lives, and it like breaks up families and cultures and just like population groups. It's really sad. So I feel for the Marshallese people, and I hope that eventually overcome through, I know it's going to take like a really, really long time, but I hope that eventually they get to a point where it's like, okay, that's in the past, and now we can like move forward.